Well, I'm going to take that video home to iMovie and we'll take out the parts.
Oh, not me eating. So everybody, let's give Dr. Mack a big hand. Yay!
Hasn't done anything yet.
Just for
This is
me.
like giving kids 5 points on the point system at the beginning. They've done absolutely nothing, but here's 5 points for doing nothing. And then we will focus on what you do wrong. I will take away points if you misbehave. And, we'll talk more about that in SPED 702. But anyhow, thank you for the invitation to be here tonight. I really was offered by your Professor Klein. I will be welcoming her to SPED 751 in just a few weeks as we talk about some things near and dear to our heart. Perhaps you had an opportunity to look at the first 2 pages, but if not, we will push forward. We're starting a little bit late on an all-day session that I conduct for school systems, and so we will be jumping around and moving quickly through it and creating an awareness and hopefully an urge to intervene on behalf of our youngsters who we care about so much. It is probably the most significant public health crisis that few people know about. We're all familiar with the opioid epidemic. We know the hazards of vaping. But before this evening, how many of you were familiar with the term ACEs and what it encompasses, what it involves? By show of hands? Well, by the time you leave here tonight, you will be quite aware of something that impacts the life of most of our students. And if they have behavioral and mental health concerns, chances are a vast majority of our kids. Yes, adverse childhood experiences. But most of us are probably familiar with the more traditional terms. Child maltreatment, sexual, physical, emotional abuse, emotional neglect, food insecurity, violence in the home or the neighborhood, things that create great stress for a youngster with a developing mind. So as we deconstruct the term, what does adverse childhood experiences encompass? What does it involve? Childhood, ages, how about 0 to 18? Adverse, things that are traumatic, that are damaging, that are destructive, and that experiences involving a great number of them. I personally have a concern that this new term, ACEs, which has become popular and now subsumes all the traditional labels that we're familiar with, will become this sanitized euphemism. It's this nondescript term that really fails to indicate the deep and damaging wounds that some of our kids experience during their childhood when terrible, horrific, destructive things happen to them. Place them at a significant increased risk for difficulties with learning, and we'll explain why that is. Bringing on a more hazardous condition, greater risk of mental health concerns and interactions with others, and also physical health. So we want to develop a heightened alertness to this so that we are more aware of the symptoms that might present themselves, so that we can intervene in a positive, productive, and helpful way. Yeah, if you look at the last, or the next to last full page in your handout, you'll see all of the traditional terms with which we're familiar that are now encompassed by the term ACEs. All the terrible things that could befall a youngster. And they can occur in different ways, show up in different forms. They can be recurring, persistent, happening over and over again, like some sort of chronic household or neighborhood dysfunction. It can be a singular, acute happening that strongly and severely affects a person's ability to cope with it. Could be a combination of things that your parent dies and you're being persistently bullied about your sexual orientation, your support pillar is gone. The person who gave you strength under those conditions is gone. A double whammy of tragedy. Could be experienced with others. Whatever your views on the political decisions that are being made, youngsters are being harmed at the southern border of our country as they're taken away from family members. Other ones too that we could include. Yes, natural disasters. My youngsters ask me a lot about school shootings. We are in what we consider to be a very safe area, very diverse, great sense of community. But gosh, they're afraid, like, how are we protected? And so here, I've got to, well, the teachers have to teach children how to confront somebody with an assault rifle. In fact, they have to think about that. That's stressful, overwhelming, but at least they've got a support system, their teachers and their family. So why should we care? What's it got to do with us? Why should we care as educators? Used to be it wasn't the realm of the school. Hey, that happens to the kid, unfortunate life of hard knocks. Okay, kid, study for the test. This is where we get a choral response. It starts with a B, the name.
Their behavior?
You.
Oh, my name?
Yes.
Bridget.
Bridget, okay, thank you.
So I think that the ACEs or those experiences would affect their behaviors and their academic performance.
Yes, it is going to affect the youngsters' performance socially, behaviorally, academically in our classroom. So yes, it does affect us as teachers. And the best guess is that 60% of Americans' children have experienced at least one major trauma in their life. We'll see some of the other figures in just a bit. Kids with behavior disorders, our best guess is 3/4 of them who have disruptive behavior disorders or perhaps withdrawn behavior disorders, inward behavior disorders. 3/4 of them have a trauma that appeared after birth. So we're eliminating consideration of kids on the autism spectrum. We're eliminating kids with FASD, fetal alcohol syndrome disorder. We're talking about acquired causation for their actions. And we think that kids with conduct disorder, these are kids who are very defiant, aggressive, rebellious, can be cruel, lack empathy for others, engage in curfew violations like getting in on time and attending school along those lines. So wow, we are talking about most of the kids in our schools. And it also affects us. I don't know about you folks, but working with kids who have had difficult lives, these are kids I care about and I bleed with them. And it hurts to help. It takes a lot out of us. And we might even develop signs of post-traumatic stress disorder withdrawing from others, doubting ourselves and our career, saying, I just can't give anymore. I'm going to stop and be very cut and dry in my interactions with kids. As we engage in self-protective mechanisms, some of the things that sometimes happen when the kids we care for are hurting. Yeah, we're the only folks who lose sleep over other people's kids, teachers. Hey, this fella back in mid-1980s, he looked so self-assured, so confident. That would change quickly when his 11 kids with severe conduct disorders, streetwise kids, aggressive rebellious, that sort of thing, came into my classroom. And, you know, I'd read their files the summer before their entry in the fall, and it was like they grew up in another planet from me. Their lives were that foreign and compared to mine. I mean, I thought that I had experienced childhood, that I had had my troubles, but when I see what befell my kids, already that secondary trauma was hurting. I mean, my biggest concern was what my mother would pack for my sandwich each day that I take to school. In these confines of my bleeding and crumpled brown paper bag was whatever was left over from the night before that I had managed to avoid. We're talking mashed turnips, creamed corn, steamed broccoli with some nondescript brown sauce would find its way between two slices of enriched Wonder Bread. And I've been given some mega wedgies in my time, and I figured, you know, I'm a decorated veteran of childhood. Wow, what was in my kids' files? We could take AJ, for instance, and his story is not so different from the other kids that I taught, but it is illustrative. This is not the real AJ, but representative of him. He was a tall, handsome, muscular, 16-year-old kid with a witty but caustic sense of humor. He was the type of kid who would wish you a happy Thanksgiving by flipping you the bird and telling you to stuff it. His renown, he was legendary for his dislike of teachers. There was one way that he knew he was going to have troubles that day.
Yeah, good one.
He'd be breathing. But we're going to take a break at this point because I have a DVD player and I want to show chapters of a movie called Resilience that talks about kids who have suffered harm in their childhoods and how we can reach out to them. So I will ask you if you can figure this out and load it up while I'm going to continue on with the PowerPoint presentation. Just do whatever you can. Yeah, he was likened to behavioral popcorn. You knew he was going to explode, you just didn't know when. He had experienced a whole wide array of traumas in his life. Before his 17th year, and this is the short list, probably about 10 things here, and there were more. You see, he had the misfortune of being born into a home that could not meet the needs of a child. And he struggled with it. He was trying his best in school, but then he fell in with a bad crowd, so to speak, in his 17th year, started petty theft from the local corner store. He and the police became involved when he broke the police book.
Yes, loaded, whenever you're ready.
Then I'm going to assume all is well,
Yeah.
much as I fear
Yeah,
that it may not be.